I like it. I love the aesthetic of this movie. It's worse. Yeah, that's it. I just love it. It looks good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think it's, like we said, we're so used to seeing stuff in like, 2.351 or 2.401 aspect ratio, that huge widescreen image of the Marvel movies and the big blockbusters. And, with this, it's just like, I love this. The static, just the establishing shots where it's just like Schrader lets what's going on in the frame breathe, whether that's a conversation characters are having or whether it's just Toller pulling his sort of salt-stained car, up to the front of the house and taking his time, killing the engine, slamming the door, walking up the steps and going inside. It's just very, I'd almost call it slice of life in a way,
Mm-hmm. And it makes the close-ups that much more thematic, maybe more powerful, because when you got that 2.39 and you're in a close-up, it's still widescreen. When you're on a 4.3, you got that's that face. You have that face in frame. So a close-up in that aspect ratio is going to hit a lot harder. I mean, it's going to make things seem bigger. It's going to make things see like, and that's what Spielberg did when he shot Jurassic Park. He shot Jurassic Park in 1.85:1 to make the T-Rex look bigger. The latest one was 2.39, and I don't think it looked as good because you got to make the thing seem bigger. And I love how this works. And I've watched movies in the past that I adore by younger directors, and they'll do shots that are very static, right? But the actors will be framed in ways that just piss me off. And I don't think I'd write it because it just, you wouldn't talk like this. It's I don't know. In movies a lot where people are just looking forward talking and they're not looking at each other. Like, how many of those conversations have you had? Or
not many, honestly. Yeah, I'm usually not sitting directly across from the person either.
Yeah, or standing. You're not looking at each other. You're about a foot to the left of the person, and you're both looking at other ways to get that shot. And listen, I get it because it cuts down on coverage. I think it's probably easier to shoot if you're in a hurry. Like A Knight's Tale, I learned that they had no time, so they just shot a 3-minute oneer with them way back in the camera. They just had to do it. But I guess none of these shots in First Reform feel unorganic. They all feel organic to me. They don't feel like, oh, look at the way my actors are posed behind this beautiful architecture. And it's a smart shot if you don't have a budget. Like, sorry if I'm talking all over you, man.
No, please go ahead.
There's a movie called, Columbus, I believe, with John Cho. I think that's the name of it.
I'm not familiar with it.
But the guy who directed it, he used to do a lot of video essays. I believe his name's Kogonada. I don't have it in front of me, but it's a really good movie, and that's Parker Posey. She's the best. And Haley Lou Richardson, they're great. And they went to this place where there's beautiful architecture, and since they had no money, they would just stand in front of these buildings, and that was their production design.
Right.
And it's great. It looks good, but some of it, I don't know, some of it just feels like he's recreating shots, but none of that in first. I'm not bagging on it. It sounds like I hate bagging on it. I'm not doing that, but this is my very long way of saying that I really like the aspect ratio, and I feel like it comes across organic.
Well, and something, Mark, to what you were saying about unnatural shots or, the stuff in front of the architecture or whatever. I think something really strategic that Schrader does, and again, it feels like no accident, is that he really downtunes the color palettes, at least for a time in the movie. Actually, throughout the movie, it's pretty dreary and dank and very, grayish blue throughout is kind of like the dominant color. Even when you're in like a white, clean cafeteria, it looks like the lights aren't on as brightly as they could be. Kind of, it's sort of drab. And something I like about that is that by making the surroundings kind of aesthetically unappealing, or at the very least not very dynamic, he does a great job of pushing the viewer, in a sense, into, I guess, an investment or not with these characters and the dialogues they share. I think of how the scene with Toller and Michael near the beginning, you have that sort of dreary office space. Behind Michael, you have this computer monitor that's ostensibly giving global warming updates in real time and some graphs and some activist photos on the wall. But otherwise, it's very it's very kind of drab and unappealing. So in a way, it's like Schrader's dialogue and sense of characterization wasn't as good as it is, it would have come off badly, I think.
No, yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, it's hard to do this, and I was saying 4:3, but the cinematographer, he actually shot the movie in a 1.33 to 1. I'm gonna have to go back and like, if you're hearing this and it's all 1:3, 4:3, I messed that up big time, so don't scream at that. I was reading the wrong thing. But Schrader wanted to do this movie in black and white.
Oh, I could totally see that.
Yeah.
And maybe that plays into what I was saying about the fact that it's so monochromatic in a lot of ways. That there's, what I noticed was the most color you see in this film is like
red.
When Toller's doing his blood draw, and there's another moment with blood, but
when the guy kills himself.
Yeah, exactly. It's against fresh snow. It totally sticks out in a way that it wouldn't if, say, it were a fall scene, and it was like all colorful already, I think. And that goes back to religion and the blood of Christ and all that stuff. So
it's beautiful. And so they shot this movie on Arri Alexa, and they did a 1.33, and they just used like 3 prime lenses. So they never wanted to do more than 3 focal lengths because prime you can't zoom. So they just kept it. If you watch, there's this sort of pattern of the 3 focal lengths that they have in this. And I don't know, I really dig it. And they say it's a color film, but it's so desaturated and it's so drained. But
yeah,
you're right, though. It's cold out there, right? And he's in despair. And they somehow catch that vibe. And I want to tell you something really refreshing that I read. So
please.
I've been doing this show for a while, and you and I have covered some of these movies where they talk like Only God Forgives. They had to do a screening to go get $500,000 to further make the movie.
Yeah.
So Film School Rejects was interviewing Schrader about this, and they were like, "Hey, how much was your budget? How long did it take to shoot?" And he said, "Well, we shot in 20 days, which is nothing, and we shot for $3.5 million." And the guy at Film School Rejects was like, "That's insane." And Schrader's like, "Actually, I get what you're saying, but," he said, "this wasn't." He said he had Ethan Hawke, right, who is an amazing actor.
Yes.
He had, Cedric the Entertainer's been acting. He had Amanda Seyfried.
Yeah.
He had excellent act, but he also, it was such a small shoot. They didn't even put signs out for the movie. Since they shot with just the 3 focal lengths and the static camera, that really limited shots. They did rehearsals before they did it. So he said, yeah, the $3.5 million and the 20 days of shooting was plenty. It was fine. And I absolutely fell in love with that because that's a crafty veteran move. It's a guy who knew his movie and he went in to make it. And I sometimes listen, like, I get it, man. Sometimes movies don't have the budgets they need, but it's just, I get tired of hearing, "Oh, we didn't have enough budget. We didn't have enough budget. We didn't have enough budget." So hearing Schrader say how he got this movie in 20 days with such heavy dialogue scenes, and there's a decent amount of locations.
Yeah.
It was so, even though the movie isn't a breath of fresh air, the fact that he said that's all he needed was really a nice, I don't know, it was just so welcome. I was so happy. It made me happy.
And I can imagine that there was he said that without any sense of ego or whatever. It was just, this isn't his first rodeo. And while the film seems, I feel like this is a monumental film, but it just seems so small when you look at the scope of it, kind of, the issues and the subjects that pop up about faith, about the state of the world, the state of the union, it's just all of this stuff really coalesces really well to lead you kind of, I love this movie because it leaves me with my jaw kind of dropped and I'm left thinking about the stuff that it brings up. I think about all the paradoxes that, Toller is kind of grappling with, in kind of his quest to do the right thing, I guess, trying to cement a sense of purpose where he feels like he's lost his purpose. He's maybe seeing a glimmer of purpose in bringing kind of these injustices that are going unchecked in the world out into the open, But of course, the Balk doesn't like that, and then Jeffers, who's kind of a puppet for Balk, doesn't like that either. So, there's a bit of politics, as always, politics. Yeah.
Yeah. There's 3 things that kind of tie in together, and it's climate change, it's mega churches, and it's cancer.
Yeah.
And you can kind of look at all these sort of connected. And I researched kind of what Christians thought about this. And I came across some interesting articles where people actually admired it. The people who were able to keep their minds open and enjoy it Some of them said that, some guy said that it's kiddie pool deep. Yeah, basically, that there really are no discussions about Christianity. It's just kind of him being shut down the entire time, or throwing out platitudes.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also a man who, he's in that despair. So all he has to really give right now are these platitudes, and just to talk like that. Like, that's why he's at this church in the first place. So he's not going to Mr. Holland's Opus somebody. He wants to go back to his vodka and probably break the toilet again. But and so, but even though I was reading these articles about people where, hey, what do you think about this? Is it Christian? Is it blasphemous? And everyone just said no. Like, Schrader, he went to a Calvinist school. He grew up kind of doing all that, so he understands it. But I guess people kind of said, so some people were saying that, like, some guy said he was standing in the shallow end of something, pretending to be much deeper. I guess it seems like this guy maybe had some pretty high latitudes of rejection towards it.
Okay.
Which means he probably watched it with his arms crossed and just thought, oh, this is kiddie pool deep. But I mean,
I'm going to be prepared to hate it, kind of, sort of. Yeah. Exactly.
But then this other guy that he's talking to worked at a mega church, and he went through his own crisis of faith. He kind of says, he's like, it's not a movie about correct theological answers. Like, it's about a pastor who loses his son and his wife, suffers from alcoholism, and oversees a dying church while the ethically questionable mega church prospers next door.
Yeah.
So he's seen tragedy in the world on personal and global levels, and then he kind of sees his church complicit in it. And so, you have this climate change and pollution as a cancer. He has his cancer, and then maybe he sees these big companies getting involved in mega churches as a cancer. But I don't think any of it is blasphemous, man. I think you can question. I think you can ask these questions, and you can look at these you can question mega churches without being blasphemous. You can. And I think to a certain extent he still wants to cling to his faith, but he's just irrevocably broken, this man.
It's interesting, Mark, because I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, and one of the reasons the film resonated with me so much, is because my dad was a UCC minister, and he, so I was used to growing up going to Sunday school and church every Sunday, and something about Ethan Hawke's depiction of this character reminded me a lot of my dad, and kind of his approach to I guess reaching out to people. Now, before you get ahead of yourselves, nobody ever killed themselves or anything like that because of something he said to him. But it was just the line from Henry David Thoreau about most men lead lives of quiet desperation. I feel like that was an embodiment of Ethan Hawke's character. But I also saw my dad kind of like when friction or conflict would kind of rise in the church, I feel like he kind of backed away from it a little bit, or he found tactful ways to try and address things, but that's just an extremely difficult spot to be in, and I can't imagine what Toller was feeling like. So I could kind of relate a bit to the introspective quality of Ethan Hawke's character, comparing it to how my dad would sit up Saturday nights writing the Sunday sermon, kind of where it's like he was kind of putting himself into a trance or dissociating kind of to get the words out in a way. It's like it literally looked like he was just like so absorbed by what he was writing down, and he wrote his sermons in longhand. So it was just really interesting. And after I saw it in the theater, I kind of nudged him and my stepmother. I was like, yeah, you guys should really watch this, because in some ways I see myself in the Ethan Hawke character too, because I, trying to make sense of a really complicated world, and there are these things that are kind of butting up against the world you want to see and the way the world is, with all these established institutions that are kind of there to kind of just inhibit people from even trying. And I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going off on a rant, but that's kind of why the movie resonated with me a lot. That's a big part of it.
Dude, we're both PKs. This movie resonates.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure you felt something perhaps similar in certain ways with this movie.
Yeah, and listen, like it's been interesting to watch him be around people, and people get weird around pastors too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Nowadays some people get like angry around them, like the kids when they were talking. And it might have seemed like Schrader was being this kind of get off my lawn type guy, but there really are conversations out there where they're just so